Welcome to the Computer Security Seminar from Purdue University. Today's speaker is Professor Gail-Joon of UNC Charlotte, and he will speak on secure information sharing within a collaborative environment. Professor An.
Okay, thank you. All right, actually, this morning I worried about my trip because of the Hurricane Ivan, but fortunately I didn't have any problem this morning. All right, I'm from the UNC Charlotte, and as you might know, Charlotte is the second largest financial service industries. Definitely top, and the number one is New York, and Charlotte is the second. We had the Bank of America in Wachovia. The headquarters are there, and also we have various small banks as well. So we've been working on the security projects. And UNC Charlotte, we invest lots of money on the security-related projects. And today, I might not be able to discuss all of the projects that I've been working on. But today I'll be talking about just one of the projects that we've been working on, the access control. And these are the project sponsors for the UNC Charlotte project. And also UNC Charlotte, we are the NSA Center of Academic Services. We got the designation 2001, and we got the lead designation last year as well. Today, like I mentioned before, I will talk about access control. And access control, there are lots of issues. But today I'll talk about just simple access control, the issues, talking about role-based delegation. But as you can see, there are lots of security technologies. And definitely, UNC Charlotte, we've been working on various security problems. But today's topic is just access control. And Dr. Elisa Bertino and Dr. Ling Lee, they've been working on the same topics, but different viewpoints. So I will talk about access control. So here is some of the lessons that I learned from my previous projects. First, to solve some problems or issues and concerns related to access control, you have to have clear understanding of environment. And also, some people say domain. So you have to have clear understanding of environment and domain. And once you have clear understanding of environment, you have to identify what kind of access control requirements you have in your organization or your environment. Based on requirements, you have to come up with access control model. And to support the model, you have to specify certain policies based on organizational requirements or system requirements. And once you have model and policy, you have to develop some system. And definitely you need a system architecture to support the model and policy specification. And to implement system architecture, definitely you have to choose the mechanisms. So these are the very important components of access control related to research. And maybe you may have some question, why you have to have policy specification? Because you already have access control model, so you might not need the policy specification. Here is the reason why we have to have model and policy specification, and why we have to make distinction between model and policy. Let's say we have two organizations. They are using same access control model, but they might have different policies. Here's an example. Maybe one organization, they don't care about the following policies, like same family members can work on the same project, or same family members can work on same department. For another organization, even though they are using same access control model, for example, discretionary access control model, in that division or in their department, they said same family members cannot work on same task. Same family members cannot be in the same department, etc. So that's why we have to have some distinction between access control model and policy specification, etc. So sounds like first you have to discuss about environment. I said first we have to look at environment and domain, etc. In access control, the research community, we develop lots of formal model, lots of theoretical model, etc. But still, we have lots of problems in a real-world application and also industrial applications because we have some gap between the industrial problems and research problems. So today, my talk will be more like the lessons learned type of presentation. I'm not going to. I might not be able to discuss the details of each step that we went through, but I will mention some of the papers that are dealing with the details of our theoretical approaches. So maybe if you're interested in some of the steps of the issues, then maybe you can take a look at the papers, then you can learn more about it. So let's talk about environment. So these days, we are facing new generation. That is my opinion. Look at the 70s or 80s. At the time, security was more like prevention and just protection and detection of some suspicious activities, to protect your asset. But these days, everybody is willing to share their resource. Like information sharing is a big issue. So the theme is we have to develop some security for global sharing. So everybody is trying to share, but still we have to ensure security objectives such as confidentiality, integrity, or availability. So the balancing the computing goals of collaboration or information sharing and security is difficult. It's very challenging issues. So today I'll talk about how we can minimize the some risks between collaboration and risks in the particular domain. This talk, I'll talk about just one domain called healthcare industries. Also, I will talk about how our application, how our solution can be applied to other domains as well. I will talk about that part later on. So look at the healthcare industry. These days, they are using computer-based patient records to improve healthcare quality and reduce cost and to provide convenient access for the patient and also the healthcare providers. And to have the computer-based patient records, that means all the patient records should be stored in the computer. That means it should be digital format, right? So we have to have computer-based patient records, and we have to have computer-based patient record systems. And then when you look at these two, the bullet point, computer-based patient record means all kinds of information related to patient. It can be video, it can be image, also it can be some kind of file, and etc. And also when you look at these record systems, to have the system, you will have various entities who is willing to access your systems. From the machine or the human being itself, he can try to access the system directly. So there are lots of issues in this healthcare industry domain. So here, I just briefly discussed about the healthcare industry, and I define healthcare industry as one of collaborative environments. And what is the issue? Look at this example. We have patient Jennifer, and her primary doctor is Dr. Chen. So usually in this collaborative environment, you have to have three notions to describe this collaborative environment. One is community, another one is relationship, another one is authorization. So we have two community here, and we have patient Jennifer. And between the patient Jennifer and the primary doctor, Dr. Chen, we have doctor and patient relations. And to provide service, healthcare service to patient Jennifer, Dr. Chen has an authorization to the patient Jennifer's record in healthcare information systems. Let's say based on her family plan, Jennifer becomes pregnant. So the Dr. Chen, he is just primary the care physician, but he is not in OB clinic. So the patient Jennifer has to talk to a genealogist or the clinic, the doctors. In this example, Dr. Jane. So we have another relation between Dr. Jane and Jennifer, patient Jennifer, and between Dr. Chen and Jane, we have another relationship. And also, in order to provide service, Dr. Jane has to access the patient Jennifer's record in healthcare information systems. So that means Dr. Chen, he has to give his privilege to Dr. Jane so that Dr. Jane can access that information. So in other words, Dr. Chen has to delegate his privilege to Dr. Jane, then Dr. Jane can access. And also, another case is the patient Jennifer might need to see specialist. Then we have another relation between Dr. Chen and Dr. White, and the White can access this information, the patient's information through Dr. Chen's privilege. So that means Dr. Chen has to delegate his privilege to Dr. White so that Dr. White can access patient Jennifer's information. It's a simple collaborative environment. And in this particular environment, what is the issue? These are the research issues. Sounds like we need selective information is necessary. For example, even though Dr. Jane and Dr. White, they have the privileges to access these healthcare information systems, that doesn't mean that they can see all the information. Okay? Even though the delegation has been done, but information sharing should be limited. So selective information sharing is necessary. And when you look at this example, information may be shared across organizational boundaries. That means each organization might have different access control policies. How your delegation can be enforced or can be specified in different organizations. So information may be shared across organizational boundaries. And also, it's impossible to fully predict what data should be shared and when and to whom. So it's very difficult to determine the future of information sharing. So this is another challenging issue. And once you delegate your privilege to others, then you need a mechanism which can allow us to revoke the sharing privilege. So mechanism must be provided for revoking the sharing when it is no longer needed. So these are the issues. Then how can we solve it? So before that, here is the problem statement. How can we share critical information in a secure manner? So here is some motivation behind this project. Before 9/11, we have lots of federal agencies. They are reluctant to share information together, right? But after 9/11, they are trying to share the information together, but they are trying to share the information selectively. So there is some important issues. So that is the main reason behind this project. We just chose two examples as collaborative environment. One is healthcare environment. Another one is law enforcement agency. I will talk about that part later. So then how can we share critical information sharing, critical information in a secure manner? You may need strong authentication. And also you need access control, and you need identity management. So we look at these three areas. For authentication, we got around $1.5 million from the Robert Johns Foundation. It was some group project. At the time, we look at the healthcare provider, and each provider, they are using different or various authentication mechanisms. The question is, can we develop scalable authentication architecture which can understand various authentication schemes, various authentication mechanisms? So we developed some scalable authentication mechanisms which can understand the password-based authentication and smart card and token, even some of the signature-based authentication as well. So in order to do that, we used the token. That token was developed from the Texas, one of the company in Texas, they call Java button. It's a small button. The token, inside this token, we have some computer chips. Even you can upload Java applets, and you can sign some information within that chip. So the the private cannot be released from the chip, etc. So we developed some solution for the authentication. Now, once we finish that part, definitely we have to look at access control, because authentication can allow you to determine who the user is, but without access control, you cannot determine what kind of privilege has been assigned to the user. So we have to have access control. And we look at the various access control models. So in this, the domain, in this collaborative environment, we look at role-based delegation, and also we are trying to provide interoperable access management, because we have various communities. We may have different organizations, and the different organizations might have different policy and different the enforcement mechanisms. Then how can we support our access control model for the various organizations? So we have to have interoperable access control management scheme. And also at these days, we also look at identity management. Let's say you have various healthcare providers, and each healthcare provider might have various users, huge amount of number of users. So then how can we control and how can we manage the identities for the entities in this kind of domain? So we look at the identity federation issues. We look at the Microsoft Passport and also Liberty Alliance specification, and we chose identity federation scheme. The Liberty Alliance identity federation is good for this collaborative environment. So right now, with the Bank of America, we've been developing privacy attribute management and identity federation architecture for a bank. Even though our original idea was from the healthcare and collaborative environment, some like the financial service institute, they are very interested in privacy attribute management. So today I'm not going to discuss all of them, but I'm going to focus on just access control part, role-based delegation and interoperable access management. Okay, then in that role-based delegation and interoperable access management part, what kind of research issues we can identify? First, I already mentioned the first bullet. Can we share information in a secure manner? That is the big question. And also, you may have another question. Do we need new security models for this environment? And what kind of security requirements and constraints or policies should be identified? And how can we specify those policies, constraints, or requirements? And how can we enforce security policies over distributed domain? And what kind of security architecture we have to use to support these models and also enforcement mechanisms. So we are trying to answer these research questions in this talk. First, then the first question was, do we need new security models? So in order to answer the question, we look at various access control models, and our conclusion was it is generally accepted that role-based access control is more suitable for collaborative application than other access control mechanisms to meet the requirements related to the particular collaborative environment. So that was some kind of the conclusion. But we realized that role-based access control cannot support delegation. Okay? So role-based delegation may allow users themselves to delegate role authorities to another users to carry out some functions authorized to the former. So in other words, using role-based delegation, you can provide business continuity, right? So, but existing role-based access control model, they don't have delegation concept. So our approach was, okay, we have to use role-based access control, but you have to propose the additional component for the role-based access control so that you can allow users to delegate their privilege, so-called role-based delegation. Okay. Then you may have some question. Why do we have to use role-based access control? What is role-based access control? Maybe some of you already knew about this role-based access control. This is just main points in role-based access control. Role-based access control, you are using role when you have to decide access control decision. When you have to make an access control decision, you have to use role instead of identity or security clearance. So role means organization-specific access control policy, or organization-specific requirements or job function or job description, etc. And according to NIST's report, they said if your organization use role of access control for access control, then through 2006, you can save $671 million. So they said this role of access control can really now support development and adoption of new complex network security systems with significant contributions. And their definition of significant contribution is dollar amount, not number of papers, so it's different. And also, this role of access control has become widely accepted as proven technology, specifically for the organization that use the role as access control decision. They are using role of access control for their solution. And these days, various operating systems and database systems, they're using role. For example, Oracle, they're using the notion of role. So long history. And also the Windows, Microsoft Windows, when they announced Windows NT, we were invited to their Windows NT announcement ceremony. And then main reason for invitation was they are using role. But when I look at their slide, they use the notion of role in Active Directory. So to manage Active Directory, the authorized user can access certain object in Active Directory. Authorized user means the user who has appropriate role, administrator or network administrator, etc. So they use the role over there. And also the Solaris, they are using role. And especially the Trust OS, the concept in Solaris 8.0, they're using role in their NIS Plus management. NIS is the same as directory server. In NIS, they are collecting all kinds of information, such as user information, group information, and network information, etc. And then, to manage that information, you have to use hierarchical structure in that administrative group. So they are using role in that part. And also IBM, Tivoli, they are using role of access control. So there are various systems using the role of access control. And what is role of access control? Let me give you access control 101. In access control, usually back in 1971, according to the Lampson's ideal access matrix model, you have three the conceptual notion. One is subject, another one is object, and we have access rights between subject and object. That is the access matrix model. And the discretion access control, they are using that kind of approach, using ACL, access control list. So user can, the object can have the access right list for the users, so user can access the certain objects based on their access privilege. And then also they can give some of access privilege to others based on their intention or their purpose, more like discretionary access control. And in the military environment, we have the mandatory access control. And this mandatory access control, you have to specify your security clearance, your security level. Then if your security level matched with the security level associated with the object, then you can access. So it's more like a security level-based access control. And role of access control, when you look at these two approaches, mandatory access control and discretionary access control, whenever you have some changes, system administrator, you have to look at all the relationship and you have to debug. So it's a very tedious task, and it's very complicated to manage this kind of, complicated to administer this kind of environment. But if you're using the role, when you look at this slide, all you have to do is you have to just assign certain users to appropriate role. And also when you create the role, you have to give certain privilege to the particular role. Then the system administrator's point of view, he has to just define what kind of role we have to have in our organization or our environment. and what kind of permission has to assign to that particular role. That is the first stage. After that, he has to just assign user to role. Okay? And if the user has to revoke from some relationship with the object, you don't have to touch this permission part. You have to just revoke this user role assignment. That means user doesn't have to worry about their permissions because their permission can be dynamically changed in your organization. So user doesn't have to worry about it. The previous stage, the access control models, user has to worry about lots of issues related to permissions. Okay, so in role access control, you have the notion of users and roles, and we have some hierarchical structure between the roles, like role hierarchies. Here's just an example. You have employee and doctor and junior doctor. It's a senior to the employee, and we have various doctors here, neurologists through primary care physicians, and also we have consultants. So we have role hierarchies and also permissions. This permission is access privilege assigned to that particular role. And also, in order to support these concepts, you have to have some kind of policy or constraints. We have notion of constraints. So these constraints can govern the entities in this role access control model. So that is the just basic idea of role access control. So that is the main reason why we chose role access control. It's very convenient and easy to administer your environment, and also you can support the collaborative environment. So that is one answer for the first question. And the second question was, then once you have a model, then you have to identify requirements and policies, and you have to specify the policy. So we are trying to provide the authorization language to express the delegation policies, and also in order to support this delegation model and language, we have to come up with supporting components, right? And then we have to demonstrate whether or not our approach and framework is feasible through some reasonable implementation, some applicable or practical solution. So I will talk about our model, and the brief will talk about policy, and I will talk about our system. What is the delegation? We only discussed the delegation several times. So through delegation, you can delegate your privileges. It's obvious definition. But also, like I mentioned before, through delegation, one of the important benefit is you can achieve business continuity. That is a very important issue, especially bank and healthcare and other collective environment. Business continuity is very important aspect, because otherwise their business cannot succeed. So through only the delegation can support business continuity. That is my point. Then what kind of issues are involved in delegation? There are lots of issues. Permanence and monotonicity or non-monotonic, and totality or the administration, and levels of delegation and multiple delegation, and you may have various delegation forms as well. Maybe I cannot discuss all of them because we have just 20 minutes from now. But the important part is, let's look at the first one and the multiple delegation. First one, permanence. So once you delegate your privilege to others, the question is, then that once you delegate it, then your delegation will be your delegated privilege can be used by the delegate forever, or you have to put some certain time duration so that time is expired and delegation will be revoked. So there are issues related to that, the permanence issues. And another issue is, once you delegate your privilege to your coworker, then you should be able to specify, okay, this delegation should be just one step, or my delegation can be delegated further. For example, I'm at Indiana right now. For example, in my office, I can delegate my privilege to my RA, my PhD students. I can give my key to him. But somehow right now he is attending the conference right now. So he has to give my key to another user. So you can provide multiple delegation, like a multi-step delegation too. So there are various issues. Anyway, I will mention about the papers that we wrote about these issues, so that if you're interested in these issues, you can take a look at it. So once we identify delegation issues, the next question is obviously revocation. How can we revoke the delegation? So there are a few issues. Cascading revocation. Once you delegate your privilege to another user, and also another user delegate his privilege to another user. Then cascading revocation means if I want to revoke the delegation, you have to look through all the delegation path, and you have to revoke all of them. Or if you can just revoke the immediate delegation, it will be non-cascading revocation. And another issue is only the delegator can revoke, or any member any member who has the same role can revoke that delegation. So it will be grant-dependent revocation or grant-independent revocation. So we have various issues in revocation as well. So in these two slides, I mentioned about this is delegation and revocation. And let's look at the model part. In this talk, I didn't bring all the details about the model. I just bring just one slide from the model part. This is the idea for the role-based delegation model. So we look at the role-based access control, and the idea was system administrator has to assign user to a certain role, and before that, the system administrator has to determine the role and the relationship between the role and object. In other words, the system administrator has to assign the permissions to that role. Okay? But when you look at the delegation issue, we have to have the new notion called delegator and delegatee. And then also you have original role and delegated roles. So in order to develop the model, we have to have a notion called original user and role relation, and the relation between user and delegated role. That means if I want to delegate my role to another user, that means I'm initiating the following procedures. This user has to be assigned to this delegated role. So that means you have the new component called the assignment between user and delegated role. Then that the delegatee can enjoy the delegated role. So that is the main reason for this distinction. Okay? And once you have this original user and role relation, and original user and delegated role, then you can develop the delegation relation. So once you have delegation relation, you have to have authorization relation. Who can delegate and how and how much? Okay, so through this can delegate authorization relation, you can specify what kind of role can be delegated under certain condition and how many times. And also you have to have a revocation authorization relation. It can be grant-dependent revocation or grant-independent revocation. Through this revocation authorization, you should be able to enforce the revocation issue. So we have delegation relation and a delegation authorization and revocation authorization. Then to support multiple delegation, you have to keep track of all the delegation transactions. We call delegation path. So delegation path should be determined. So delegation path, to keep the delegation path, you have to have certain notions. So I will show you that approach that we took later on. And once you have the delegation path, and you can collect all the delegation paths together, then it will have some kind of the web. In other words, delegation tree. So you can keep the delegation tree to maintain some kind of redundant delegation, and also using this delegation tree, you can leverage your revocation approaches as well. So here is the example. The delegation relation, this is the example. You have director and you have lead physician, PL1, and the PC1 means collaborator physician. So in this delegation, the John, he is a director, and he, the delegate, lead physician role to Kathy. And after that, Kathy, she delegate collaborator physician role to Mark and Ruiz. And the John, who was the director, he delegate collaborator physician role to the David again. So this is just delegation relation. So this delegation relation should satisfy the can delegate authorization. And once you have this kind of delegation relation, you can easily develop delegation path. And if you can collect all the delegation path and the delegation relations, then you can develop delegation tree. So using this delegation tree, you can easily debug the delegation, and also you can find whether or not we have any cycle within the delegation or any violation of constraints, etc. So it will be very convenient for you to check. And this is example of weak revocation. This is the similar to the previous one. So we have this additional here. So this is a delegation tree, and I'd like to, for example, not the John, he wants to delegate, he wants to revoke the Kathy's role, Kathy's delegated role. In this case, non-cascading weak revoke. So you can just revoke the Kathy's role, but still the Mark and Ruiz, they can enjoy their delegated roles. But if we are trying to support strong and cascading revocation, then whole the subtree, the node will be gone once you invoke the strong revocation modules. That's the example. So we just briefly look at the role-based delegation models. We have delegation relation, and we have authorization, two authorizations. And in order to support that delegation model, we have delegation path and tree and delegation relation. And once you have the model, you have to specify the policy. You have to specify the rules. And we use rule-based language. There are two reasons for our decision. And is, to use rule-based language, you have three concepts, functions, and rules and policies. And Dr. Elisa Bertino and Dr. Linguli has been working on it, and then maybe you already read several papers related to this kind of the basics about rule-based language. And using these basic components, you can specify the policies. This is just basic rules, delegation authorization rules, and cascading rules, and etc. Once you have basic rules, and then through the basic rules, you can drive various authorization rules. This is just the base rules, delegation authorization rules. Through this rule, currently this is one example of our derivative rules, delegation authorization derivation rules. So in this case, we have to check who is the senior, and you can check whether or not this user is active or not. So you can put various the component in these derivative rules based on your organizational policies. Okay, and also you can specify policy, and also you can specify the constraints as well. So just one example, separation of duty. I think, excuse me, I think you are familiar with the notion of separation of duty. Here is some example from bank. let's say you have purchase manager role and you have account payable role. And simple separation of duty concept doesn't allow you to assign the single user to both roles, because then he can commit the fraud easily, because he can purchase goods and he can issue the check using his account payable the roles. So you have to have some kind of distinction between the mutually exclusive roles. So the user cannot assign to the conflicting roles, and also the conflicting users cannot work on same task, and conflicting permissions cannot be assigned to same role. And also you may put maximum number of user role assignment or permission role assignment, like cardinality constraints as well. So those are the constraints. This is a summary of role-based delegation. Sounds like you already have role-based access control model in 96, and we have administrative role-based access control to manage role-based access control. But in this talk, we propose role-based delegation model which can support delegation in role-based access control. So this the notion of delegation is a little bit different from trust management. We are trying to develop delegation notion inside existing role-based access control. That is the difference. And this is the components that we developed to support role-based delegation. And the role-based delegation, the framework can be found in ACM transactions on information and system security of the papers. Okay. And there are various related works, obviously role-based access control literature and delegation literature and collaboration literatures, and also the semantics, like how to specify policies. So we look at the various approaches. Okay. So we have the model. Then next question is usability issue and applicability issues. Like I mentioned before, we have lots of access control models, but still industry, they are not using those models. Here's I think, good example. Still, the bank, they are using just username and password for their online banking systems authentication, even though you have nice authentication mechanisms such as smart card or bioinformatics, biometrics, but they are not using it, right? Because we have some gap between industrial, the application, and the research world. So here, my argument is, once you develop the model, then you have to apply the model to real-world application and real-world systems. Then you can prove the feasibility and applicability and usability of your approach. So we develop some systems. Our system has several components, attribute service, because we are dealing with a role, and then your role can be exchanged across the boundaries. So that means you should be able to carry your attribute, your role, across the boundaries. So you have to provide certain service for that, attribute service. And obviously you have to specify policy. So policy service should be there. And we are dealing with delegation. So we have to have some component which can be in charge of delegation and revocation issues. And also you have to have authentication and access control agents. So once you delegate, a delegation agent is for just delegation and revocation. Delegation agent cannot support access control decisions. So that's why we have two additional component called access control agent. But this agent will determine whether or not user can access based on their privileges. So this is some relationship between each component. You have a user wants to delegate certain privilege to the user, then that request goes through delegation agent. And delegation agent will check the role service and the rule service, and then you can check whether or not we have the violation or any conflict between the delegation request. And if everything is fine, then finally the user can delegate the privilege to the other users, then other user can access the objects. So in order to support attribute service, we used attribute certificate, so-called privilege management infrastructures. I think you guys are familiar with PKI, public key infrastructure. And along with the public key infrastructure, we have additional the notion called privilege management infrastructures. In that, the privilege management infrastructures we have attribute certificate. PKI, they are using just, they issue the certificate with the subject information and the subject's public information, right? But attribute certificate is different. Attribute certificate, you don't have public. We have just user information, and then you can put the user's attributes, user's privilege information here. Okay? In this case, role. And then you can sign that certificate, and you can issue. So this certificate will go to access control, the user. And from the access control server's perspective, okay, here's the example. User received this certificate, so he will know, okay, this is my name, holder, and this is my role, let's say director. And he can present that certificate to the access control server. And from access control server's perspective, he has to know what kind of permissions, what kind of access privileges are assigned to that particular role. Okay, and look, when I discussed about collaborative environment, according to our example, we have various the organizations. That means within your organization, your server will know what kind of permission should be assigned. But other domain, they don't know, right? So in that case, you have to issue another certificate to that the access control server. This certificate include just role information and associated privileges, like access rights or permissions, so that access control server can know, okay, at least you just present the role, the director role certificate, and according to this certificate, director role can enjoy these permissions. Okay, so we are using attribute certificate, and the details can be found in this paper. And using that certificate, you can deliver, or you can carry your role information to the system. And from system server's perspective, you should be able to specify rules. So you have to we developed the rule editor, and using the rule editor, you can specify the healthcare related policies. And then using these tools, finally the user can delegate their privileges. Here, sorry for the small font here, we have user Dr. Chen. Based on our example, Dr. Chen, he opened the session. Currently, his role is primary care physician, primary care provider, and he has certain certificate here, attribute certificate, and he's trying to delegate neurologist role to Dr. Jane, and this is the duration. So for the convenience, we just use Microsoft Excellent feature here. So we developed this interface to support it. Okay, and also we apply that approach to law enforcement agency. Look at the law enforcement agency. Each officer, they are dealing with various crime cases. Okay, and if he has to go to another place, then he has to delegate his privilege to another officer, and another officer can take over the crime. So that is the some of the approach. So I will skip some of the slides, and I will just present the last slides. We don't have enough time. Okay. So this is ongoing project and future works. I've been working with various issues, like how we can support delegation in wireless, and how we can determine the role, in other words, role engineering, and how we can identify vulnerabilities, etc. So we are working on these kind of research issues, and this is a future research work. And also this approach can be applied to military environment. The military, by 2025, some of the soldiers will be replaced by robots. That means each robot has to communicate with each other, they have to share the information. The question is, how can you support secure information sharing between robots? And also, the critical infrastructures, they have to communicate with each other and have to share information to provide good quality service. So that is a good area too. So this is summary. This first attempt, and we developed the role-based access control, role-based delegation model, and we articulated the various issues. And also we demonstrate the feasibility of our work through the proof of concept implementation. And this work has been supported by National Science Foundation and Department of Energy Career Award. Okay, that's all I have. So if you have any question, I'm happy to take it.
Are there any questions? We may have time for one or two. Yes.
Yeah. Do you know if like open source implementation of X509 attribute certificate?
X509 certificate.
Attribute certificate.
Attribute certificate part. I don't think we have open source implementation, but OpenSSL you can look at some of sure, but attribute certificate has not been widely accepted. Because still, to answer the question, still we are not using PKI for authentication. So without PKI, you cannot use attribute certificate.
You don't see any flow in the design.
I don't think that the issue is from their design. Issue is maybe some management, key management, and revocation issues. That is the same as the PKI issues. So, but I like the PMI approach. So we are trying to use this PMI approach for the banks. So if you are trying to apply this kind of PKI or PMI, you have to choose closed environment, like trusted environment. Then you can easily apply.
Any other questions? Well, why don't we thank our speaker then? Don't forget that next week it's at 3:30 at the TMU.